Still being told to wait. This meeting thing really came in with like a lion. Now it's a wounded lamb.
It came in like a wrecking ball, Miley Cyrus.
Yes. Wow.
It says it's streaming on my end.
I know, but I can't.
Yeah.
I've got a window that I can't. Oh, wait a minute. Okay. Now I'm good. Stand by. Welcome to Outwitting the Manipulator, the podcast that gives you powerful techniques to protect yourself as a manipulation is taking place. Now here are your hosts, authors, and communication experts, Robin Galinsky and Dr. Dennis Becker.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are
Hi,
happy
everyone.
to be back with our fourth live stream. And today, if you haven't seen this before, the way these go is we spend about an hour. If you're hearing this on a podcast, it'll probably be a 30-minute episode. So we split it down the middle. The first half, we have a topic about manipulation that we'll be discussing. And the second half, we will have a guest with us. So Dennis, how you doing? Spring has sprung.
Yeah, more or less. You know, I'm realizing that the guests that we've had so far, Robin, have really been interesting. Some of them have had incredible stories, which I hope our listeners and viewers are appreciating, because it's heartfelt stuff. And it's sometimes very difficult to hear what these folks have been through. But and today we'll find out. I don't really know what our guest is going to tell us today. We don't rehearse this. We take whatever they give us. So
That's
we'll
right.
see what it's going to be. So I'm delighted to be here.
We're keeping it real. We're being real,
Yep.
which makes it much more interesting. And including today, Dennis and I have a loose topic to discuss, and then we just let it unfold. And we don't always agree, but we hopefully give you different perspectives and things that you can resonate with and apply in real time to thwart manipulative communication. And today's topic that I thought we'd kick it off with is something called the backhanded compliment. The backhanded compliment is when somebody says something nice to you, but embedded in it, insidiously embedded in it, is a takeaway. So even though it sounds as though they're lifting you up, they are not. It leaves you feeling icky. And there's just something about it that's not right. And it's such an artful, this is a very sophisticated art, right? Because it slides in and under most people's radar, even to the point that when Dennis and we talked about 5 minutes before the show, and I gave him some examples, he said, I don't see how that's manipulative. And I said, well, save it for the show, because I will tell you how that's manipulative. So let's talk about that, Dennis, the backhanded.
Let's remind folks that if you have a question as we go along, put it into the chat, and our producer Dave will somehow gather all of that for us. And if there are a couple of questions as we go along that you'd like to ask, we'll try to answer them on the air, so to speak. And if we don't get to all of the questions, as we usually don't get to all of them, we'll answer you separately. Provide us a way to get in touch with you, and we'll answer every single question, concern that you have. But
and if you're seeing this live, you'll see the links. You can click on above to get our book. Follow us on the podcast. If you're listening to this on the podcast, you can go to Outwit in Real Time, and you'll find everything there, all the training, the coaching, everything that we offer. We're very excited and very passionate about helping people thwart manipulative communication. By the way, there isn't much out there in the world that will cause you more pain and suffering than manipulation. It will rob you of how you feel about yourself, your very well-being, your joy. And it's quite insidious. That's why I really want to dig in to this topic of the backhanded compliment. This can come from a boss, a teacher, a friend, I'm using air quotes, and it just leaves you, it sets you up to fail. And we're going to do a little real play with it so that you understand what I mean by that. When it's done very artfully, very sophisticatedly by the manipulator, the way that you respond to it can make you look worse. That's why I say it is a very advanced manipulative tactic. So, Dennis. By the way, Dennis,
Yeah.
I just want to commend you on, you're not usually very good with technology, but today you were very adept at switching from your desktop to your laptop when we had sound trouble. So good for you.
Is that meant to be a manipulative piece of love bombing, or do you really mean that?
Well, that's not love bombing. That's it's got love bombing in it, but that is an example of a backhanded compliment.
Ah, there we go. All right.
So why? And we've got lots of examples. So why, Dennis, do you feel, or maybe you didn't feel it? And see, here's the thing, Dennis, that is even better, right? You may not even have your radar up, but I've already done some neuro-linguistic programming on you. Because why? What did I do? How did I start that off?
You started off by telling me that I'm not usually very good with computers.
Yes.
Or technology.
So I reinforced that.
Yeah.
So if I know, let's just say that that's an Achilles heel for you, or something that I know makes you feel insecure, or something that's you're beating yourself up about, Dennis. You want to be better at it. You wish you were better at it. I'm just going to rub it in just a little bit, but so I get it in, right? I get it into your brain. I reinforce that that way that you feel about yourself. That's not positive. It's negative. But right on the heels of it, I say something positive. And so it makes it very difficult for you, first of all, difficult for you to even register it, right? Because it's just so insidious. But then what can you do about it without looking defensive?
The first thing, as the target of that, the first thing, this is why I mentioned this before, the first thing that I feel is that it's a little bit a subtle love bombing. And I don't mean that completely, because love bombing is is filled with so much hyperbole, but it's a make me feel good. It makes me feel okay or something when you say these kinds of things. And so I don't recognize it immediately as a manipulative tactic. So the first thing that you say, you're not normally good with it. That's another tactic, by the way. Earlier on in many of the other shows, we've talked about complimenting people and saying things to them, or using surrogates or other things, and describing how you feel about things. So when you tell me, or folks, when your manipulator tells you that you are not very good at, they're dictating something to you. They're telling you how you are and how you should feel, and how people perceive you, true or not. They say it to you as though it's a fact. So that's kind of a twofer there, Robin.
Well, it's a really good point, Dennis, because what we talk about is we have all these tactics, right? They don't live in isolation. When a manipulator is sophisticated, they use multiple tactics simultaneously. So today we're talking about the backhanded compliment. The backhanded compliment, when we're dissecting it, is really a sandwich between invalidation and love bombing. It's not a full sandwich, because it's only two parts, but
you could have said to me, you could have said, look, everybody says how you're not good at. Now everybody says
now I'm using a third party. Yep.
There's another tactic. See, so these things don't come at you one at a time. They come at you two or three at a time sometimes. And so this backhanded compliment thing can be very difficult to spot, because it feels like it's perhaps one of the other tactics that we've talked about. And it can feel confusing or good or whatever. So let's dissect this very carefully, because you hear it and you don't always recognize it as a manipulative tactic, but very much so. You'll see as we go along here. So go ahead, Robin. I didn't mean
Well,
to interrupt you.
we have more examples. I mean, one that I received was, wow, you look really beautiful with makeup on. What can you say to
that
that?
if you didn't have that makeup on, I didn't say that. Mm-hmm.
So
That's the way they
but
comment.
somebody says that to you. Let's just take that one, for example.
Yeah,
Well, the implication is there, right? You
of course.
need something to feel beautiful, period. Like you or to look beautiful. You need all that stuff. And
Yeah.
the implication is without it, you're not. What does that do? It erodes how you feel about yourself. It is meant to erode the way that you feel about yourself, because that's what the manipulator is always trying to do, is control, get in your head how you feel about yourself so they can then make you do whatever or think whatever they want you to do. Now, if I was to react to that and go, oh, what do you mean? So what are you saying, that I don't look good without makeup on? Now that's another data point for the manipulator. That's a good thing for them. Like, hot button, trigger, insecurity, store that away. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I wanted. So you're like, oh no. And then they get real sheepish. No, you're always beautiful. You just, the way that you put your makeup on really highlights your features. I'm just saying. And they do the back paddle or whatever, but it doesn't matter. By then it's already too late. If you're around other people, now you've got witnesses who now they've set you up. When I say they set you up to fail, now you look insecure, reactive, all of those things. So it's,
You know what this reminds me of, Robin? This is another, let me put another technique in here that we've talked, well, if you haven't heard us before, but we've talked many times on the show about another one called apophysis. One of my favorite words, apophysis. So I would say to you, well, look, I'm not going to talk about the fact that, you're not good at technology. I want to talk about the fact that you had this today you did. See, I said, I'm not going to talk about it, but then I go ahead and talk about it. That's what's called apophysis. When they say, well, I don't want to be concerned about your makeup, and what you normally do. I just want to tell you that today you look, what? So it's blended, it's combined. It's sort of like seasoning. The tactic gets seasoned with 2 or 3 different things. So it's not always easy to recognize. As Robin said, it can be very difficult to recognize. Go ahead, Robin.
well, this is often done a lot professionally as well. In a work environment, it's so easy. So easy. So actually, my brother just told me one that somebody said to him at work, I'm surprised at how successful you are despite your socioeconomic upbringing.
Oh, jeez. That's
So
a
it's
good one. Wow.
Yeah, that's a good one. And actually, someone said to me, Dennis, I don't know if you remember, but I was coaching at an Allstate convention. I was coaching speakers, VPs, and I have a BS degree, and the other woman had a master's degree. And we went out afterwards to talk about the day, and she said, wow, you really surprised me. She goes, despite your lack of education, you're actually a good coach.
Yeah. That's a
Backhanded
good one.
compliment.
That's perfect. Good
Backhanded
example.
compliment. It stings and it sits with you. You're not floating on the positive side of that. The sticky part is that they got it in. They got in that invalidation, that judgment, that you're not enough. You aren't good enough.
You know what? Another interesting twist that they put on that is saying that in front of other people.
Well, there you go.
Yet
That's
another
the power.
element of, another tactic they put in there in front of your colleagues, your friends, your boss, or whatever. So it's not only coming to you alone. It may be said in front of other people, which is just another tactic. So these things, these backhanded compliments are a combination of things that you may be hearing.
So let's get to the
What we
solution part. I'm sorry, Dennis, to jump in,
right.
but
Good.
we started a little late and we do have a guest that's waiting. So
Okay.
I want to
Good.
move us to the solution part of this. So I
Yeah.
I mentioned that you're set up to fail. And if you get defensive and you say, hey, that's rude, or I don't appreciate that, or whatever, it makes you look defensive. It's none of that's good. So think about the objective of the backhanded compliment. I mentioned it already. It's to erode your confidence. It's to make you feel insecure about yourself. So the opposite of that is what you want to do as a response. Show confidence. So what can you do? Well, one is you could completely ignore it and change the subject and just laugh it off. Just go, oh yeah. You could look the manipulator in the eye, say, thank you very much. I appreciate that, with as much sincerity as you can muster, which shows them I'm not rattled at all, but I'm only going to focus on the positive part of that. That's my takeaway. I'm going to completely ignore that other aspect of it. So that's another way to do it. And it depends, right? What's the context? What's the setting?
Yes.
Are there other people around?
That's
Go ahead,
so
Dennis.
important. That's so important. I'm so glad you mentioned it. I was going to just say, even if you say the exact words, the exact way that Robin said it, it depends on where you are, the context in which that was said. Like I mentioned, in front of a lot of other people, or the event that you're at. It's not, things don't come at you just one-on-one. They're often decidedly, very carefully planned to come at you in times when, here's another one, you can't say much because you're in public. So it's a combination of things. All the things that Robin is saying, the examples we're giving you, yeah, you can dissect it one by one, but you'll find out it's a variety of things. So you're right
The
on,
public
Robin.
one is
ignore. I like that one. Ignore it. I like that one.
That's probably the best one to do in a professional setting.
Yes.
It's very difficult, right? If your boss does this in a meeting, in a conference room, and they say, "Oh, actually, now I'm remembering, Dennis, the professor that did that to me." I was in my senior year of college. There was an exam, and I thought there was a question on the exam that I thought was completely unfair. It was poorly worded, and it was a big part of the grade. And I raised my hand and I said, I think this question was poorly worded. And he goes, oh, you got it wrong, right? And I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, well, that was a finance question. He goes, what's your major again? And I said, marketing. And he laughed. He goes, marketing. Yeah. It seems like you'd get a finance question wrong. And didn't go well for him, because I stood up and I said, raise your hand if you got that question wrong. And everybody in the class got it wrong. And I said, is everybody in here a marketing major? Or was your question poorly worded?
Oh,
So,
you were bold.
Yes. Well, I was raised by a manipulator. So this is why,
Well, you know
this
what?
is why I'm,
You know what? What did you use there, folks? Those of you who have been with us all time and time again, she was a little bit feisty.
I was very feisty.
Doesn't mean nasty, but she came back at it with something direct and something somewhat caustic. That's being feisty. Good technique.
But he was, I was a pro at being diminished, especially with public humiliation, because I was raised by a mother who did that. That was her most powerful weapon, which she really wielded in my coming of age years, which is when you're the most sensitive to embarrassment. And when I saw that that was a power tool for her, I decided I wasn't going to care, because by caring, I gave her more power. So I broke the code on that, which is why I'm doing this work now, to help you break the code on that, because you don't want to empower the person with your reaction, which means you also need to control your nonverbal, because remember, they're watching you very closely for any tell that comment got
everything. Remember that we said they are trying to control the momentum of the moment. Now, in this particular tactic and the techniques that we're teaching you, the momentum of the moment can easily be controlled by you, according to what you do. So your facial expression, for example, although it may seem like nothing, that little bit of expression that you give, in that, they're watching that. And you can either do it in such a way that your manipulator will control it, or you can control it if you do it the right way. But we want to give you the control, because they move from moment to moment. I mean, literally moments. We're talking about seconds here. They move from moment to moment to moment,
Yep.
and each one may carry a different tactic. And for you, each one could carry a different technique to protect yourself. That's why we're saying that term, momentum of the moment. They mean it seriously, moment to moment. They control
And it
things. They
requires
want to.
practice because these things
Mhm.
sneak up on you when you least expect it. So practicing your response, knowing you know who your manipulator is and you know what their tactics are. So practicing a confident response where you don't allow it in will be very important. But I will warn you, and we'll end on this note, it doesn't end there. They escalate from there because they don't like being thwarted. So when their game will increase, and then you need to increase your strength. So it's not like, whoa, I got through that meeting or I handled my own. No, and that's exactly what happened to me with that professor. I had a target on my back because he did not like that I called him. I gave it right back to him. And too bad. Now the next move is you still have to hold your own because they're going to come at you again with something else, which he did. I ended up having to go to the dean over that guy. But you have to be prepared for the escalation. And that's what all of this work is about. We prepare you for that. Our coaching, our training, as much
And
as we can give you in the podcast.
We have to say note taking again, Robin. We've said it so many times.
Yes.
These things happen so quickly. They go by so fast. The moment you get a chance, write it down.
You need to write it down so you can start to identify the pattern.
That's the word, patterns. There are patterns. These manipulators find things that they think work, and they do it over and over again, different settings, but over and over. And you will begin to recognize the pattern that they're using, and then you'll be able to develop the techniques that you need to thwart that particular tactic in that moment. That's why we want you to control the momentum of the moment. But write it down, make a pattern, keep a track of it, because they'll come back at you and you'll see it.
And when it comes to the backhanded compliment, focus on only the positive thing they said. Ignore the negative. Do not reveal in any way that you were bothered, verbally, non-verbally, in any way. And be prepared for escalation because there's going to be another one coming your way. And I'll tell you, if you can do that, especially if there are witnesses in the room watching that, instead of them focusing on you and thinking you're defensive and you're too, and you know, all of that, they're going to say, wow, that she's really confident, or he's really confident.
Strength.
Yeah, you will demonstrate strength to the room, and they'll say, wow, you really know how to handle that situation.
And if your manipulator sees you gaining strength, he or she is losing strength.
Yeah, because it's always win-lose. Always with them. Yeah.
It's either always. They either win or they lose. And when they lose, they're likely to go away and choose somebody else who's easier to be a target.
Or they escalate, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. Yes. Escalate.
And also, I would just say one other thing about that, Dennis. We talked about public humiliation. Public humiliation is a very powerful tool to keep everybody else in fear and in check. So a lot of times you'll find nobody comes to your aid or your support or anything, maybe quietly, maybe privately, but they'll say, oh my God, I'm so glad he's not doing that to me right now. I'm so glad she didn't single me out. And they just try to dodge it, and they get more control over others by doing that as well. So it's the best thing you could possibly do is learn how to hold your own, stay strong, model that behavior for everyone else, ignore the negative, focus on the positive. The negative is irrelevant. You do not want to give it any relevance, and then be prepared for it to escalate, because it will. And guess what escalation means? That means you're succeeding. Yeah. So don't see that as a problem. See that as a win when it escalates.
And it can be tiring. We know that. It can be tiring over and over.
That's why you got to get away from them eventually.
Yeah. That's that's the absolute best. Get away from these people. But it can be tiring. So don't give up.
That's all we have to say for this week on backhanded compliments. So we'll end there. And now we'd like to introduce our guest. We have a guest with us today. And her name is Allison Kurt. And Allison hopefully will come on screen provided technology works. There she is.
There she
Hi.
is. Hi, Allison.
How you guys doing? Can you see me okay?
We can.
Awesome.
Can you see
You
and
see
hear
me too?
us? Because this is always an important thing.
Mhm.
Oh,
Yep.
awesome.
Good.
Awesome. So, Allison, I know you and we've talked a lot on the phone, and we still have yet to meet in person. But Allison has had some experience similar to mine, actually, very similar to mine, with a family member and a chosen family member, I'll say, without revealing anything you don't want to reveal. And please don't, we don't have to use any names. But Dennis and I had sent you over some questions just to review and think about, but you can share whatever you think will be helpful. And we just like to learn more about your experience with manipulation, what you've learned and what you are learning as you go along with manipulative relationships.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. I'm so excited to be here. Yes, I do have a family member who has some narcissistic tendencies. Actually, I wasn't even aware of such a thing. I was so used to it. It was the conditioning I grew up in. So I didn't know any better. You know, when somebody's manipulating your whole life and not letting you seek your own truth, you basically think that's normal, right? So
Yeah.
Yep.
I was seeking external validation all the time. I was never be good enough in their eyes. So I was
Yeah.
invisible carrot to be perfect for everybody else except me.
That's tough.
And I say that because a lot of times if you're a narcissist, you attract narcissism or someone who manipulates you, you have codependent tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Sure.
You know, this need to make everyone else around you happy, right? So when I was until the age of 5, my father was an alcoholic. So I grew up walking on eggshells and blaming this external reality that I'm the fault of the drinking, right? So that's what kids do in that situation. And because I was watching my mother's interaction, you know, she was suppressing me, and I'll say that's the narcissism in my life. My mother was suppressing me. My brothers were like gods, and I was just there to be at the whim of everyone else. So I was always being like, I was the clown of the family, right? To keep the peace and keep the happiness. So I was being manipulated. And anytime I shined, there was always these backhanded compliments to keep me in check. And I didn't know any better. And that's
Can you give us an example? Because that's perfect.
I feel like there's underlying things like, oh, you'll never be rich enough. You're not smart enough. It's always to keep you in check.
Yeah.
It's a way to suppress, you know, and keep you at their whim. Like you're like the slave to them because you don't know. Somebody you love is telling you these things as a child, you believe them.
At what age, Allison, were you when you realized or you started to get a clue that something wasn't quite right?
I think when I was engaged when I was 24 years old, and I went to the therapist and they said, tell me about your mother. And I go, my mother? What does my mother have to do with it? And they were really shocked that the stories my mother was telling me about my worthiness.
Oh.
I had cheated much at such a young age. I still didn't have inherent worthiness. There was never going to be enough level for me to have her approval.
Yep. That's right. That's right. That's how it works.
Shocked when he was like, it sounds like your mother is being really cruel to you. And I was like, Mom, no, my mother loves me. My mother, I was defending her. I had this story that my mother loved me, like really loved me and was a good mother. She played the martyr role a lot, you know?
Oh, yes. And that's actually a very common thing to happen as they age, as a narcissist ages. They use their health as another tactic.
Or I did this for you and I did that for you. And
yes.
And we feel so guilty, and there's so much underlying in codependency, which is related to narcissism and being manipulated. There's so much shame. You haven't done wrong. I always like to explain to people the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is you've actually done something wrong, like, right? So your body inherently says, I lied, I cheated, you know, you get this feeling. But shame is you've done nothing wrong and you feel like you've done something wrong.
That's an excellent distinction. That's really
Yeah, it's
helpful.
good distinction.
So I studied it, and the work we've done together has really helped me see the patterns. So I'll give you a recent example. My mother, I was having lunch with her, and this is the fourth time she's brought up my religious beliefs and said, "Oh, your religion." And I said, "But Mom, you know what they are. Why do you keep questioning them?" And immediately, this is what they'll do when you call truth on them, when you speak truth. She goes, "I'll get up right now and leave this restaurant." Like, how?
Yeah.
Out.
Yep.
Yeah. She was attacking me. You're not even allowed to acknowledge they're attacking you, you know?
That's right.
Yeah.
They are
Right.
so good, aren't they? Oh my gosh.
They
And
are.
then once you see it like you are seeing it now, Allison, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And then it's
And
hard.
this began, did you say this began, or you began to notice it around age 5? You think all that started at a very early age?
I think I have a view of my mother being this beautiful, motherly, and then at some point around 5 or 6, the energy changed a lot. I think what happens from 0 to 7, we're in like theta state in our mind. It's a psychological term. Literally, you're absorbing everything around you. After 7, you start questioning things.
That's right.
Yes.
That's exactly right, Allison. And they don't like you anymore after that.
Get it?
That's right.
Up until then, you're just adoring. You're just an adoring child who's just, like you said, just there at their whim. But then you start having your own thoughts, and boy, they don't like you.
It's interesting you mentioned religion, because without mentioning it, I'll tell you that there is a very prominent religion in the world today, which, oh boy, hundreds of years ago, they proclaimed, "You give me a child from birth to age 7, and I'll tell you what that child will be the rest of their life." Because those early years are so impressive. And why did they say age 7? Why not till age 17? Why? Because as you mentioned, Allison, it 7 or 8 is the age of reason, so to speak. And you start to question, you start to ask, you start to doubt sincerely. I mean, not in a nasty way. You really want to understand things. It sounds like that's what happened to you.
Absolutely. And I think my whole life, I've had a very strong connection with myself, or God, or source, whatever you want to call to it. And my mother was very threatened by that. So that is, for me, my connection to my higher self, or God, is my truth, right? And she don't want you to ever be aware of your truth.
No, because
it's yours. It's yours.
Right. You can't have anything. You're property to her.
Yeah.
So of course, I'll fast forward 20 years or into my 30s. Of course, I married a narcissist because I thought that's
it's very comfortable, I'm sure.
Yeah.
With my ex-husband, it was a little bit different. He was very manipulative in the beginning. I didn't see it because I tend to see the best in people. I didn't see, I'm just reflecting on that right now. Sorry. I saw the best, and I kept seeing the red flags, and I kept ignoring the red flags because I really wanted to see the best in him. See that this, continue with this, but it was really an illusion.
Right.
So
what was
and they count on that.
They do
count on that. They count on that what they give you, in quotes now, I'm putting air quotes there, what they give you, they think you want and need. And maybe at the moment, to a certain extent, you do. And you don't recognize where that path is heading. But you eventually saw it, I guess. Is that right?
Well, over time, you start to recognize there's a pattern. And I'm just wondering, for you, Allison, when was that there's usually, there might be one moment, or you just realize, oh my gosh, this is a pattern. Like, if you can describe what that process was like for you. Or how you got the courage to change, it's not easy, right? I mean, I think I spent 12 years trying to undo my relationship with my ex-husband, and before I finally snapped.
For me, what happened is, after I got my divorce and separation, I really needed to understand, how did this all come about? I said, this can't be. I'm a very kind person, loving. I'm very forgiving. how did I attract this? And, you really got to go back and look at your childhood. And the therapist said, I was a narcissist. I was like, oh God, what is that? And she explained to me, and I said, wow, that's exactly who she is. And then, well, that's how you attracted a man like that. That's what that was your love language. I didn't choose that, but that's all I've ever known, Unfortunately, I had to go back and piece together, because I'm an engineer. How did this happen? The cause and effect,
Yes. Methodically.
Absolutely. And I really wanted to know those tendencies and make sure it never happened again, that I would never be with a man like that. So
can you give us maybe some things decisions you've made that are going to make it that difference for you now?
It comes back to, if you're a codependent and you suffer from like unworthiness and shame, you have to build a foundation of self-love, and you have to get your from yourself. So codependents go externally for all approval. They don't have any self-sovereignty. They don't have any of their own approval, their own love. It's always an external kind of validation. So I have to stop seeking externally. It's like any other drug. I say, like, the drug of choice. It could be, shopping, overeating, drinking. For codependents, it's this drug of external approval. So I had to cut myself off. You're not getting that externally anymore. You have to get that from yourself.
That's excellent. Boy, that doesn't sound easy either.
No, it isn't. So I really had to take a step back from all relationships and have a full-on relationship with me. What do I think? What do I feel? What do I believe? Where do these beliefs come? I questioned everything, and it's a relationship of self-awareness is what actually you need to do.
Yeah.
You're striking a chord with me, because I remember the therapist asking me how I felt in couples counseling, and I was unable to answer the question. Every time the words would come out of my mouth, it would be my ex-husband's name and what he was thinking, what he was feeling. And he was like, I'm asking about you. And that was one of those moments where everything shifted, because I realized I had no sense of self. I had no idea how I felt about anything, because I needed somebody to tell me how I felt. That's all I've ever known, like you, Allison. But anyway, I wanted you to continue, because this is really helpful. Good stuff you're giving us.
And I apologize, my cat is around in the background.
Oh, that's okay.
So
Cats can be very manipulative.
Yes.
Yeah.
Interactive, Dennis.
My journey looked like spending a lot of time in nature and getting to know myself. I said, we're going to know each other. We're going to figure this out. And I had to become my own best friend, really.
That's amazing. That is not easy.
No, it wasn't. It took all my courage not to listen to what society said was right for me, but to listen to what I needed for me.
Yep, that's a lot of courage. And did you feel, so then as you went through that, I mean, what comes up, what I'm wondering is, those demons, like at night, especially if you're alone, you can be haunted by the demons, the negative voices, the negative everything, the questioning, how in the more vulnerable moments did you muster the strength through it?
I had to trust myself, and everything that was difficult in my life, I always went back to what's in my best interest. And that takes getting quiet, and that takes introspection. And I meditate every day, and I spend time in nature. The only way I could really hear and silence all the other voices of fear. And just to give you an example, in 1 year, I moved from London to Boston. I had my daughter. My father died 3 days after she was born, and I got a divorce. That's amazing to go through. And that's within a lot of transition. And that's very difficult for any human being. So I went through the extreme. And when you go through something like that, something in you wakes up. It's like it cracks you open,
Yes.
Really start to rely on yourself, because you realize what got you to that point of those harsh situations wasn't working. And that was the external validation, listening to other people's opinions, not validating myself, betraying myself to keep other people happy. It wasn't working,
I love the way you said that, betraying yourself to keep other people happy, because I've been talking a lot about how people are complicit in their own manipulation. It cannot take place unless you are complicit. But, you know, an innocent child doesn't know they're being complicit. They think they're just trying to get love. So that's where it gets really confusing for people like you and me. We're marinated in it from birth. It's harder. But then once you start to realize that you're betraying yourself by being complicit, oops, we lost her.
No, her cat just turned the computer in a different direction.
Well, I'll just finish that thought while she gets back on. That's the hardest thing of all, because you can't hide or run from yourself. So when you face the fact that you've lied to yourself, I was just finishing that thought, Allison, where you feel like when you realize you've lied to yourself, when you realize you've betrayed yourself, there's nowhere to run or hide, because you're with you. And a lot of people will run and hide by taking drugs, by drinking a lot, by, like you said, all the other things, shopping, sex, all the other things that they do, getting 9 pets, you know, or whatever. But there is so much to be gained by forgiving yourself for that and recognizing.
Allison,
I always say people don't even, like, most people that are in a narcissistic relationship, things will get bad because you're betraying yourself. So eventually nature will work its way out, because we're not meant to not love ourselves. We're not meant to betray ourselves, right?
Right.
right.
Yeah, I really believe the universe will work its way. It never works out in those relationships.
That's right.
Worse and worse and worse. So
that's right. And it's really hard to bear witness to other. Well, we lost her again. It's really hard to bear witness. Here. Oh, there she is. Okay.
Sorry. It's
really
cutting out. I apologize.
Oh, that's okay. It's when you do realize that and you do heal from it, and then you witness other people who insist on doubling down and putting their blinders on and staying in a relationship like that. That's also very challenging, because you can't save other people. Like you said, you have to come to it on your own.
One thing I'd like to add, which is really important to any listeners, is that when we are in a manipulative relationship, in our body, we feel this energy that keeps us from speaking our truth. So, excuse me, my kids.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. Yeah, that's right. You do feel it. And actually you get sick from it. I mean, I was in my late 40s, and I look older than I look now. 20 years later, when I look at pictures of myself when I was at the end of that relationship, it was killing me, absolutely killing me, slowly.
Allison, I want to ask you a slightly related question, but a little bit different. How did other people factor into all of this? Did you find other people who were helpful to you? Do you currently find confiding or socializing with others helpful to you? Once you attain that awareness, which you described, what was the relationship you had with other people, and were they perhaps helping the manipulator in some way, or were you able to call them out, or what happened to your relationships once you became aware of this?
Whoops, hold on. Okay, say it from the beginning, Allison, because it wasn't.
I set up boundaries with people. I started to look at every relationship in my life, and I saw a thread of narcissism. My best friend, hopefully she doesn't see this, but my mom and other people in my life, I would see where I was playing that role. And then I had to step back and say, why? What am I getting from this relationship? They're not giving back what I'm giving, right? So I'm betraying myself. I'm not loving myself. And I started to put space in everybody. And I really recommend that to people. Like, you almost have to take an internal retreat with yourself.
Yes.
And look at all your life.
That's an excellent point.
Many.
You have to get perspective, and you can't get perspective with the manipulator chirping in your ear. You have to get distance.
If you live with them, you have to get out of the house.
Yes.
Find space for yourself.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
You mean that physically, literally get out of the house. I mean, you need to create physical space.
You do, because your energy body not just your physical, but the energy body reacts in their in their presence. So you can feel, and you keep like the pattern, the program keeps running, even without words. The energy body is in the program.
That's so true.
That's very
That's
true.
so true. I can't even tell you. That's such a good point to bring up.
A name you may recognize is Eckhart Tolle, and he talks about the energy body. He refers to it as the pain body, and that every one of us has a pain body around us and within us. And when you have one, you have your pain body. We all have our own things. But when someone else has a pain body and you get too close to that, their pain body becomes your pain body. And so it's really important for you to recognize, first of all, the self-awareness that you have this, and this is the way you are, and this is what it is. But then to recognize that there may be others in your sphere who have pain bodies. And those are the people I don't think I want to, you probably want to stay away from those folks. So your ability to discern that and to identify the narcissism or whatever it is in them is really very important, so that you don't feel compelled to interact with those kinds of folks.
You'll feel it in your body. Yeah, you'll feel it in your body.
You do.
Yeah, and that's actually on the app. We have, Dennis has a meditation that's a visualization of a protective bubble, which helps, right? Because sometimes you can't get away from the person. You do need to, you have to, maybe it's your boss or something like that.
Yeah.
But visualizing yourself in a protective bubble actually works. You've got nothing to lose, right? If you hate the woo-woo and you don't believe in it, you don't have to believe in it for it to work. It takes 30 seconds.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah. So, I mean, anytime you're in their presence, you have to have some type of force field or a bubble or light, anything that allows you. But it will be difficult to be in their energy, actually. It will take time until you build that inner strength.
Yes.
Like get grounded in yourself, so your energy is internal, not external, where they can grab it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about how subtle all of this is with the communication. There's an energy aspect, and we don't talk a lot about it, but it's just as powerful as the word. Well, the words have energy, they have a vibration. Everything does. So yes, they do. They get in, they permeate your energy. They got little barbed hooks. They get in there and they stick with you. The stuff that they say, they get in your head, and that's toxic and erosive.
And it's very real and very strong. A good manipulator knows how, just by standing near you, saying nothing, they know they can impact the way you feel, the way at that moment. So you're absolutely right about the energy forces and fields. And we don't talk too much about it, but we've all experienced it when you feel somebody standing behind you and like, what do you want? We all know that feeling.
Yeah.
That's what manipulators are really good at. Just sometimes just standing near you, being in the room. Doesn't have to be real close. Maybe they're in the same room, but they want you to know that they're there, because that's their effort to control the momentum of that very moment. So you're very wise about that, Allison. That's correct.
The last thing I wanted to mention is for all the mothers out there, because mothers who are with manipulators, typically there will be a child that kind of represents that. So to be aware that you don't create that manipulation situation with your children.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yes. That's a very good point.
Yes. And that's not easy either.
It's not easy. It's easy to make that mistake. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that. Have you learned that anything about that, or what have you learned about that with your own child?
I learned that, especially as a codependent, we typically don't like negative reactions from our children. They're to please and make sure they're happy and content, and it creates like a discomfort in our body when they're crying, when they're unhappy. So they can start to manipulate us.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. They learn quickly how to do that. Yeah.
Especially if like in a marriage situation, right? With a father and a mother.
Yeah.
They leverage the other parent.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. I've been in that same situation, and it's very difficult.
I think all of us who have had kids, if you've had kids at all, folks, if you're listening to us out there, if you've had children, you've probably been manipulated at some point because we feel like, and I know my kids, I have 4 kids. My kids, I probably, now that I think about it now in retrospect, but when they were younger, and I don't know whether they knew what they were doing. I suspect they did sometimes. They knew darn well how to manipulate my behavior or my mother or dad's behavior. They knew.
But
So
even beyond
manipulation is
that,
a
Dennis, what
thing.
she's saying is that the other parent who is the manipulator uses the child,
Oh yeah.
Oh, sure. Oh, of course.
and
Of
it
course
makes
there's
it
that.
very difficult because
Yeah.
you've got the well-being of the child, and they don't care about the well-being of the child. They
No.
care
No,
about
no.
winning at
Yeah.
winning, whatever winning is to them. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
makes it very, very, very challenging and difficult. So my youngest was 11, Allison, when I went through my divorce, and my oldest was 17. I was flat out honest with them about the situation and what narcissism is, and educated them. And it was the best thing I could do, because it's very easy. By the way, it doesn't take a lot of work to turn a teenage girl against their mother. Not a lot of work at all. It's really quite easy. And I was really scared of that, because I knew that their job was to rebel against me, and that was just going to be leveraged. So it's not easy, but that's why we're all here doing this right now, is to help create awareness, build strength, give you tools. Allison, it's not always easy to come on. I really appreciate you. I'm really grateful for you to share, and this will be our podcast, so we will send it to you.
Yeah.
I really,
Wonderful.
Dennis, for
It's-
having grateful to see you live in person.
yeah, and I'm so glad to see you so strong and healthy, and what great advice you gave everyone.
Great
Really.
insights. Really, I'm sure there are a lot of people who haven't thought about it the way that you've expressed it, Allison. So it was really, really very helpful, I'm sure, to us, and I'm sure to a lot of our listeners. So thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you guys. Have a good night.
You
All
too.
right.
Bye, Allison, and
for
everybody out
now.
there. We'll be around. We'll be doing another episode. But for now, please go to Outwit in Real Time to find out how you can connect with us, how you can get our book. You can listen to the podcast. You can download the app. And we thank you for your time and attention, and look forward to the next time. Robin Galinsky and Dennis Becker saying bye for now.